Let's read some negative reviews of Animal Crossing New Horizons. There's not usually a lot of negative reviews for really large games from critics. This is actually a mixed review. You can tell that this reviewer did something very specific to try to sound good. So let me just read it real quick. Eventually, you get game-changing terrain tools to freely remap the cliffs and water. And at that point, the only thing holding your island together is any attachment you fostered with the way things have looked for the many prior hours of play. And maybe we choose to keep things the way they are, despite the power to reshape and remake however we please. Enough of Animal Crossing New Horizons is still measured and thoughtful enough to foster those connections that make the series so refreshing and vital. But it also feels tainted, with its world so much more blatantly at your mercy. Rather than a newcomer to a simulated community that was there before, you're now the god of the sandbox. I feel like this reviewer was attempting to suggest it's a bad thing that they gave you the ability to create. That's a head scratcher. Maybe they misunderstood the premise of Animal Crossing New Horizons specifically. There's plenty of Animal Crossing games that do feel more like a simulated community, sure, but that's clearly not the purpose of this game. They gave so many different customization options that likely the community had been asking for ages and ages, so they loaded it up in this game. They gave so much player freedom to do whatever you want and create whatever you want, and then people said, but now it doesn't feel like a simulated community and I have too much power now. Why would you complain about that? I feel like they said this specifically so that they could have some like interesting prose to be like, rather than a newcomer, you are now the god of the sandbox. Like, I think they just kind of wanted to sound, especially when there's not any negative reviews, they might see an opportunity to the standout review that looks different than everybody else. And listen, I respect the ability to say something that nobody else will, but I don't think that that's what this is. I wish it was. Otherwise we wouldn't be disagreeing with it, would we? I don't have a lot more to disagree with here, except that what is the point of this sentence, for instance? Maybe we choose to keep things the way they are despite the power to reshape and remake however we please. What's the point of that, I guess? They're saying like, I don't want to have power in the game. Stop giving me player freedom, which, if you really don't want a game like that, that's fine. But there are other Animal Crossings that offer that, and I find it odd when people want exactly the same game, but new. I just, like, why would they bother making that game? It already exists. Okay, so here's the next one. So that's what I have to say about new. This is the end of a review. This person went on and on and on, and I am not going to read you all 2,000 words of this review, but I just find this hilarious. That's what I have to say about New Horizons. And even though I've spent the last 2,000 words complaining about it and titled the post what I did, I have to be 100% honest. I love this game, despite everything. Even if it didn't live up to expectations, it's still a game I got 300 hours out of and still go back to just to fish for a while. And I think take in its environment, it was the next line. But why would you write a 2,000 word complaint when you love the game? I feel like gamers just want to complain in this day and age. And that's part of why I'm doing this series, is because I feel like it's just constant complaints, and it's, why are gamers complaining so much? We're given everything. People are spending 2,000 words on an essay, hundreds of hours in a game, and then want to complain about it? But why? What joy does that bring you? And me personally, I just watched it unfold from the sidelines. I am not an Animal Crossing guy. I feel like that's all we really need to read into this. So somebody doesn't like Animal Crossing, but they're gonna complain about Animal Crossing. Like, this isn't the series for me, and I hate this game because it's part of that series. It goes on though, it gets better. Due to the shenanigans with the real-time clock. That's something that's unique to this game. There's not a lot of games that do that. And that's what makes it special, because the holidays happen with your holidays if you have the clock correct. By the way, I didn't have the date right, and Rossetti would yell at me if I actually turned on the game right now. If we still had Rossetti, that would be my biggest complaint. In all of the reviews that I've read, there's not a single one mentioning Rossetti. I would just like to point that out. That is my complaint. It's just not the kind of life sim for me, given my IRL schedule. I actually used to play this game before work every day. I would come on at 7 a.m. I just don't understand like complaining about a game that's clearly not your type of game. I mainly stuck to Xenoblade Definitive Edition and Fire Emblem Three Houses. Those games are absolutely, completely and utterly, from what I understand, I've played neither of them, but from what I can tell looking them up, they have absolutely nothing to do with Animal Crossing. They are not in any way related. Animal Crossing is like a little creative sandbox game, like the other person, the critic, actually complained about. So I don't really understand why they're playing this game if they don't like games like this at all. But they go on and they say the game was a victim of free updates and Nintendo loves doing this with their multiplayer games. So they clearly have studied the industry, even if they don't like games like this. I don't know. I mean, maybe they just like games like I do, I guess, wherein they put out a new entry for full price that's considered half-baked compared to previous installments and hope players keep playing long enough to download the free content updates whenever Nintendo decides to put them out. Remember Froggy Chairs? Nintendo eventually did. What I get from this, Nintendo kind of does this live service update over time for kind of a shorter period of time. It's not years and years and years. This kind of came out over about a year and a half with their updates. So they put out a game by a deadline, and this is the game that they wanted, and it had a base game that I think most people enjoyed a lot during the Panini, and then they added more stuff as they went on. Who needs, like, yeah, Froggy Chairs are cool, but just because it was in an old game doesn't mean it needs to be in a new game. The new game doesn't need to be everything the old game was. That already exists. You can still play it if you keep the console in the game that you played it on before. You still have access to it. Why would you need the new game to look exactly like the old game? So I don't really understand any of these complaints, to be perfectly honest. Disagree. I don't know. For me, the older Animal Crossings were kind of like a life simulator game. I can understand that. I played the old games, obviously. Rossetti shirt. I loved the old games. Played them on. I remember playing them, you know, in the backseat of my parents' car when I was younger on the old like Game Boy Advance or something back in the day. I remember the old games, but I just attending events and stuff. They still have the events, you know, now. You can still talk to the NPCs now. I don't really understand what's missing from the game. It's cool you can customize your whole island, but for me, the building aspect is too prominent and the main reason to play this game. If you aren't a fan of terraforming like me, I guess, the game just kind of gets boring fast. I mean, I don't feel like they really got rid of much. The only thing that I was like, I need other than Rossetti was the flea market I missed, but they have other things that you can kind of do that are listen, I wish we still had the flea market, but that was one of the only things I can remember that they really got rid of. They changed a few things here and there, but they mostly just added to the base game. And so to complain like the last person that the base game doesn't have enough to do, and like this one who's like the terraforming's too prominent, you don't have to terraform. There's still plenty of other things to do. I don't know. I don't really... There's more to do now than a lot of the older games. And I know maybe New Leaf, that's maybe not the case, but for Wild World, if you're part of the old Animal Crossing loving crew, I don't really understand what the problem is. It's just an addition for people who wanted that in the first place and didn't have that in the older games. So this one lost me completely. Okay, so this isn't like a whole thread, by the way. Agree. For me, the very special thing about Animal Crossing is that it was a little world you could go and visit whenever you wanted. The little world felt so alive. I loved that it seemed to carry on whether you were there or not. The villagers had their own lives, things to do. You were not the most important thing there. There really wasn't anything to do other than walk around and experience the atmosphere of the place. Now they've made us too important. We have the responsibility of decorating and literally shaping the land. It's hard to just soak in the atmosphere when I feel like I've got so much to do. You can still just soak in the atmosphere. Nobody's making you do the things. If anything, I don't think that Animal Crossing, of all games, is forcing you to do anything. There's nothing in the game that's yelling at you. There's no indicators. There's nothing that you miss, really, if you're not constantly decorating. So I don't really understand this one. You could just go in and fish and fill the museum if you want. You can go talk to the characters. I'm not sure why having additional decorating features makes them feel like they need to do them. Disagree. The villagers are too nice and happy now. Okay, that one I can't fully disagree with. I loved Wild World because the villagers felt so real. They could randomly feel sad for no reason. They felt really alive and interesting to talk to. Now they just say the same things. That I fully disagree with. I feel like anybody who says this didn't have Mo on their island. I'm sure there are other villagers that are somewhat similar in weirdness, and I'm sure many of them have more dialogue choices if you continue to talk to them. Seems like it's not just unless they don't have interesting things to say, but some of them are prioritized differently is my theory. But Mo has legitimately, he talks about bugs in his floorboards and what they think. They judge him about his snacks, and he's constantly talking about snacks. And then he one time was like,
what if we're in a video game and there's somebody watching us and doing everything for us, and what if we're not even real?
Listen, the old games never did that. That broke my mind. So anyone who says this has not dug deeply enough into the game, in my opinion. I don't hate New Horizons. I actually love it. And in a lot of ways, it's the best game in the series in terms of quality of life and gameplay, but it's really missing that something special. I mean, it's all there. And if you don't like it, like if you really just don't like the game, the other games still exist. Especially when somebody says, I actually love it. Like, this is just an additional new game that has new features that you've never experienced before. The old games didn't go anywhere, and you still love it. So I feel like it's just complaining to complain. Surprised by the negativity. I absolutely loved it. We probably won't play another Animal Crossing game. It was very much a 2020 thing for us. Okay, so this person is replying to that message. They said, I mean, that's exactly the problem that causes negativity to exist. You enjoyed the game because it came at the right time for you, but you wouldn't have enjoyed it as much at any point. And I think this person actually gets to the crux of why there's people that don't like this specific game later in like hindsight. They loved it at the time because they were stuck inside and they needed something to do, and they were filling that time with something they enjoyed, but then they go back and they're like, but it could have been better. And I just think that that's such a, now I don't want to play it anymore. And it's like, well, you spent 900 hours in the game. What more do you really want? I wonder if it's just because it was people who don't normally game. And so because they've played it all, in hindsight, they're like, it's not even that cool. I already did it all. It's like enjoying a certain meal recipe because you're starving and you'd eat anything. I don't know if, I mean, kind of. I mean, the thing is, there's so much to do while you're stuck inside, whether that's gaming, reading, creating something, starting a business even. It's like a million things to do while you're stuck inside. You can learn an entire language, I mean, for free on the internet. So you chose to play Animal Crossing. It's not like there was no other food around when you were starving, per se, using this example. So I find that intriguing that people would play the game if they didn't like it or because it was the only thing to do. I don't buy that. There's plenty to do for free on the internet. Like this video, which you should like and subscribe to because it's free on the internet. You wouldn't eat that food otherwise, and then still being surprised if food is bland or tasteless. Animal Crossing games have always been amazing, and people who played previous titles always got addicted to them, looked forward to the next, but AC&H feels as if it's where the series has come to die. It added terraforming at the expense of everything else. All that ambition and potential has just stopped. The reason that Animal Crossing is still being replayed now, 4 years later, is because of the terraforming. I have seen streamers recently doing little tournaments, little games where they're trying to, I think, race to collect items on an island. It's still a popular game to this day because people are still coming up with new and exciting designs to make for their island and still maybe filling out their museum, because if they're not time jumping, it might take them a little while to find everything, or maybe they're just playing a little bit every day. Because again, the clock is part of the beauty of Animal Crossing. So I think this is, if we were weighing this in years from now, I don't think that that's going to be the case. I think this game was actually the most popular game of 2020. It even beat Call of Duty, which is normally the most popular game of the year. So yeah, I'm gonna go with wrong on that one. I love every Animal Crossing game, and New Horizons is no exception. I've recently picked it up again, and I have close to 900 hours in it, but I still prefer New Leaf. The game has raked in so much money and had people buying second Switches just for them to do one big update, a DLC of more designing, and then drop it completely. They made a huge mistake stopping with the updates. I had fun decorating my island, but it feels like it's the only big selling point. I miss the island games from New Leaf. I also wish they'd add more villager dialogue and give options for customizing the town square and maybe even the stores. So what's interesting is we saw people complaining about how there's not enough, or how there's too much decorating, and this person says there's not enough decorating. So nobody's ever, I feel like you can just never please an audience for a game. They could have had less, which is silly because, again, people can just ignore the stuff they don't like, especially in a game like this where it's not forcing you to engage with anything. But this person's asking for more, so okay. There's so much. There's already so much. I understand the want for more, but they also have put 900 hours in. So this one's pretty long. Basically, they're at the beginning, they're saying the content feels spread thin, which I feel like can be fixed by adding more items and customization options, which is, to me, wild because there's so many customization options that if you start running out of them, you can go to Harv's Island and get them to add more customization. You can design tons of custom things yourself that you can put on some of the items, on the ground, on the wall. Like you can create all sorts of things where you can put your designs in all sorts of different areas and things on your island. Reducing time limits on things you can do on your island. The whole process of moving things takes multiple days unless you're willing to time travel, which for me says that you can't make this person happy because they literally have the option if they don't want to wait. It's not like you're playing Candy Crush where if you run out of turns, you got to buy something. You can just change the clock on your Switch. No one's stopping you. Resetti's not going to yell at you anymore. There's nothing at all that de-incentivizes you from doing that. And if you are against that, then you wait. That's part of the process, is the beauty of having this kind of in real time. And if you don't want it in real time, you have the option not to. So that one's an odd one for me. I understand being a purist if you don't want to time travel, but to complain about the waiting when you're not gonna do it, I don't really fully understand that. DIY projects are good for a lot of things, but I wish there was more. I mean, there's so much stuff and you can use multiple things in multiple ways. For instance, a lot of people use the servers in backgrounds to look like cityscapes. Having some limitation allows you to get more creative with things and be more impressive about what you've created with less. And so there's something to be said for there being limitations as well, even though there's a ton of different things that you can use. So that one is baffling to me as well. Okay, so the tool durability feels a lot like Breath of the Wild's weapon durability, which I feel like everybody speaks highly of Breath of the Wild, so I don't really see a problem with it. And they go on to say when you're carrying tools of sticks and stones, but not when you have a gold tool. But then they go on later in this review to say there's no reason for replayability, but the tools breaking is a reason for replayability. It adds those kind of features, make it so that you have to kind of continue on with maintaining things on your island. It lives and breathes a little bit, just enough to kind of keep you going, just enough to keep you hitting different doing different tasks in order to continue what you're doing. It adds to it. And so again, this is a complaint that kind of conflicts with some of their other complaints. This game is a nightmare for completionists. Good way to chill and take my mind off of things. I wish it had more content. That is the more content. The fact that you're upset because it's hard to get the things to complete, especially if you don't want to time travel, to complete your museum, complete other things. That's the replayability. That's the more content. I don't know what else people want. I would be so upset if I were a game developer in this day and age. I think I would like to at some point, and then reviews like what I see all the time, all over the place, are part of why would I want to create anything? Because all people ever do is complain. I don't. And yes, sure, there's a lot of raving reviews, and I think it's very valid to come up with objectively fair reviews. And obviously this person did both pros and cons, so there's something to be said for having that balance. But I think if you're gonna do cons, this person did put some factual elements in here, so I think that this is one of the more well thought out ones that I've read of any game of recent times. But it still has so many conflicting elements within the review itself that I just wonder if these people could ever really truly enjoy something, or if they're commenting on it just to be negative, which I don't think is a very fun way to play games personally. And I'm someone who really does talk about the positive and the negative, and I will try to push through games I don't even like further on than I would like to just to be able to speak to them. But I'm still going to try to line up my pros and cons in a way where they're not conflicting with one another and where I explain kind of the ups and downs. I'm not going to say a game doesn't have a lot to do in the same essay as, well, things break and it's a nightmare for completionists. Those don't match up. Okay, terraforming, A+, rest of the game, C. NPC system, F. Overall, I spent 350 hours in the game. These are not short amounts of hours in these reviews. If you've spent that much time in a game, I hate to break it to you, but you like the game. I'm so disappointed with how underwhelming the NPCs are. How come Stardew Valley has entire storylines for every character, but AC can only manage to give theirs 4 sentences? This game felt like a colorful graveyard. Okay, so I think it's fair to try to compare cozy games with one another in order to call out the distinct elements. I think this is what I was trying to say in the last review, to call out the distinct elements of each game and say, objectively, this is what they did. Here's what I like and here's what I don't, but this is what they did that's different than other games in the industry. Here's what they did that aligns with their marketing. Here's what they did that kind of paced well and did differently throughout that series and that game. And so you can compare it that way and then put your opinion around it if you'd like to, or build from your opinion with those facts. And I think a lot of people are using those facts to bolster things just to complain, because Stardew and Animal Crossing are 2 extremely different games. And while they're in the same kind of cozy genre and have a lot of people who enjoy both games, and there's a big overlap of that audience, they have components that are both very unique to those games that have made those games stand out and do well in the industry and do well in different ways, because we have one that is Nintendo and we have one that was built by one person, and both are beloved games, and they have different purposes. Like Stardew Valley has very few decorative elements compared to Animal Crossing customization elements. Animal Crossing, legitimately, you can fill up your entire museum and by catching everything. That's your reward, and you can go through and like look at everything you've caught over however many years it took you to fill it. You can bring people to your island and let them see it. You can do the same thing in Stardew, so that's something where you can be like, oh, they both have that. That's cool. Let me compare the multiplayer options, which you don't see a lot of people doing in these kind of analysis, which is interesting to me. If you're going to review, if you're going to take the time to review, I feel like there's a lot more that you could say that would help other people kind of understand more about the game and the industry in general without just kind of complaining nonstop or just being overly positive. We're looking at the negative reviews, but people get very overly positive about games too. I think it's just like, if I were a game developer, coming from that perspective, I would want to see people talking about, oh, they did all these new things I've never seen in a game. This one worked for me. This one didn't. This is what I like. Really calling out the standout elements of the game, whether they're good or bad. And they did that with the terraforming in this game. That was called out multiple times, but it was pretty much, they didn't give it its fair dues when they were complaining about it, if that makes sense. And you'll see me kind of breaking things apart in this series when I take apart the positive reviews of a game. That's kind of what I would prefer to see in some of these, because just like straight up complaining, I feel like it's not good for the soul. And so I'm not even just going to complain about the complaints. What I'm trying to do is build something up positively. And so if I were giving reviews to try to call out the negative aspects of this game, the last thing I would do is compare the characterization to Stardew in a negative way without saying, oh, but here's what the characterization does in a different way. Because you know what Stardew doesn't do? They don't go to the store where you created all of your different personal designs that you drew in a portal all on your own, put out there for anyone else to use if you want, put up in your clothing shop in the back of the store, and then you go to your island one day and you see one of your favorite villagers wearing a shirt that you made. That's not something that you can do in Stardew. So while Stardew might have storylines for every character, Animal Crossing has more customization in a million different ways. You can give them something and they'll put it in their home. In Stardew, their homes never change. I haven't quite finished that game, but in my experience, not much changes in their houses. I think there's a better way to describe what we like and dislike about games. And I'd love to see more open dialogue that covers more of the aspects that we can build better games off of and make better recommendations off of. I am MADkurious. If you disagree with me, feel free to say why below. If you don't, then say I'm a real gamer. I do a lot of variety gaming here. I would love to see you in the next one.